My name is Dave Keating. I am the climate and energy reporter for European Voice. Comment Visions is a joint project between Euronews and European Voice, which is done in association with Shell. These projects, the main purpose of the Comment Visions series is to have open discussions about energy issues in a public format. And in that vein, we have these discussions both online and live here in Brussels, where you all are. For tonight's event, we're going to talk about climate. And when we were first thinking about this event, we were looking at the timing coming straight after Doha and what Doha means as a bridge to a future international climate agreement, hopefully. But we were also looking at the other major pillar of climate action in the world, which is market mechanisms, and the leading market mechanism, which is the ETS. Now, this event is coming on a particularly important week, I think, for the ETS. Yesterday saw the price of carbon drop to an unprecedented low, below €5. It's the first time it's gone that low, and it's, I think, this week causing a lot of questions at the same time that we have legislative activity in response to the Commission's proposal to do something about the low carbon price. We have a proposal to have backloading as a short-term fix, but that's experiencing some somewhat unexpected pushback from MEPs and member states. And then there's also ideas about how do we ensure that the ETS is working in the long term. And I think for both of these tracks, for the international climate negotiations and for the EU ETS, we're looking at a crisis of confidence. People aren't sure about what the future holds, if a global climate deal is possible, and if the ETS is fixable. So we're going to be discussing those two issues tonight. I'm pleased to introduce to you, I think we have a quite diverse panel here that will be coming at these issues from a variety of perspectives. Here on my right, we have Connie Hedegaard, who is the European Commissioner for Climate Action. She's obviously been involved with international discussions in climate for many years, not just as an EU Climate Commissioner, but also previously as a minister with Denmark. Then to her right, we have Matthias Grütte. He's a German center-left MEP, and he's chairman of the Environment Committee, which may be particularly pertinent to our discussions on the ETS because the backloading proposal will be discussed at the Environment Committee meeting on Thursday. This is a very important meeting for this proposal, with support being roughly 50-50 in the Environment Committee right now, as far as I can tell at least. It's a bit of an unpredictable element. So be curious to hear his take on those discussions in the Parliament. Next we have William Garcia, here on my left, he's the Executive Director for Energy at CEFIC, and he's going to be giving us the perspective of intensive industry, which obviously when it comes to ETS has a very particular concern with how things develop. Then here to my left we have Karolina Ostroniewska. She's Poland's Deputy Permanent Representative to the EU. Poland actually holds the rotating presidency for the UN Global Climate Talks for this year, and the summit will be held in Warsaw this year. So she may have some interesting things to say about what she anticipates for the coming year. But also Poland is particularly active member states in discussions over climate, and they have a perspective that a lot of other member states look to for leadership. And finally, we have Tom Brooks from the European Climate Foundation. He can tell us a bit of the concerns from environmental campaigners, both with the state of the ETS and with international climate negotiations. He's all the way down here on the right. And at the end, we're going to have a summary from David Hone, who's the Senior Climate Change Advisor at Shell. He will kind of give us a quick recap of what we've heard. So we're going to start with about a 5-minute introduction from each of the panelists, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So we can start with the Commissioner.
Thank you very much. I do not know, this works? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the initiative. Thank you for the invitation. 5 minutes to address all these issues is not a lot. I'll try then to be extremely brief on the international talks first. We can come back to details. Actually, Doha delivered what Doha was supposed to deliver and expected to deliver. You could say nothing much more, but also nothing less. Doha marks the transition between the old system, where we are negotiating in 2 tracks, one for developed countries, one for developing countries, to say it a bit primitive, into a new regime where all of us will have to be equally legally bound and everyone will have to commit in the same form. That we succeeded in sort of keeping the momentum. I used several times in Doha this facts about China having a per capita emission now in the size of 7.2 tons. In Europe, the average is 7.5 tons per capita. It shows why we have to enter into this new era when we talk about climate talks. I just mentioned this because we are not there yet. Lots of work has to be done. But this priority is a key priority and was a key priority for Europe and for European business for many, many years, to create a future regime with only 1 track. So it's not a small achievement, it's actually quite important, and I hope very much that the good news we had in Obama's inauguration speech yesterday, that will not only be good news for the domestic US thing, which is important, of course, but I hope it also means that we will see a stronger engagement, stronger involvement on behalf of the US in the international climate talks, because that is also very much needed. Maybe we can come back to that later. There are many issues that we have to address internationally, but I will just say one thing then and use the rest of my time on the ETS and where we are now domestically in Europe. Because I think it would be such a big mistake if now in Europe we start to get too nervous of doing what we have actually been successful in doing now, when China is starting to move for a lot of reasons, but for instance because they have been buried in smog now for days and for weeks. You can see the Chinese leadership say we must do something about air quality, we must come up with regulation. Maybe, and you can read that in Financial Times today, they would even come up with some kind of cap and trade system for air quality and air emissions, air pollution, and they have publicly stated that they have to look through the whole energy supply system. They have, in other words, realized that if you only think economic policies for the short term, then you end up having some very, very severe problems to address. You could say the same for the Americans with Hurricane Sandy and all this and the costs attached to it, where, for instance, in a metropole like New York City, you had a blackout of electricity for thousands of companies for more than 10 days. Could you imagine that happen in Europe? No, you could not. Why? Because we are normally not only thinking politics for the short term. We believe that we also have a responsibility to think beyond the short term and take initiatives, policy initiatives, make regulation also for the longer term and the medium term. And I believe that it's absolutely crucial that now in Europe, we do not consider ourselves to have become so poor, so much hidden by the crisis, that we do stop thinking also beyond the short term, when now our competitors are starting to realize what the costs are in doing that. And I say that, and that's my last point, because this discussion and this situation we have right now with the emissions trading scheme, that is actually a serious situation. And I can only say that to those member states who have not made up their mind yet, that don't believe that those who lobby you to say that if just you can get very, very low carbon price, maybe even no carbon price, that then the alternative is nothing. That would be a mistake. Because the alternative is not nothing. The alternative to a joint European market-based system that can do its work by sending a reasonable price signal, the alternative is a patchwork of 27 different national systems, where you risk having a renationalization of European energy and climate policies. And I have to be very, very direct here, saying that some of the industrialists and some of the organizations behind them lobbying very, very strongly in these hours with our member states and with European Parliament in order to make the backloading and all this just go away. They are toying with something very, very dangerous, because you can try to block political decisions, but don't believe that the alternative would be better. So my plea to member states that have not made up their mind yet, who are normally also member states that consider themselves very green, that the time is now to come out in favor of backloading. Backloading is not rocket science. Backloading is a no-brainer. If you have a market that is overflooded with something, then we can discuss all interesting things about structural options and everything else. And that's very fine, and the Commission has proposed that and invited for that discussion. But the first thing you do in a market-based system, that is that if you have a market overflooded with something, in this case allowances, you at least stop to continuing overflooding the market. This is what the backloading proposal is all about. It's not taking away one allowance for anybody. Not 1 ton is removed. We just do not continue to overflood in the first years. We keep these allowances for later. This should be common sense, and I can only encourage those member states who haven't made up their mind yet to try and do it quite urgently. Because what is at stake is actually that we have a market-based system that can do its job. Final point, sorry, that was then 5.5 minutes, I guess. But the last point, those who think that then you have this sort of, isn't it only good in a time of crisis that prices drop? Prices also on carbon. Yes, of course. And the price has dropped. When the climate and energy package was adopted back in 2008, the expectation would be that at this time the price would be at 30 euro per ton. Yesterday it came down to 4.70 euro. Is that making a strong enough price signal for the power companies to make the right decisions for the future, the cost-efficient decisions for the future, the decision that our citizens expect us to take? Is it the right signal if we really want to move forward on energy efficiency that everybody will say would be to the benefit of the European economy and competitiveness? No, it's not. It is too low. Yes, it would be lower because of the crisis, but it should not come as low or even lower as now. And that is why I have to say it rather seriously tonight. Member states should now come forward and do the right thing. Stop overflooding an already overflooded market.
Next we can hear from Mr. Grutan. Mr. Grutan, if you could tell us a bit about the
First of all, I have to spend applause for the statement of the Commission. Last year we celebrated 20 years common market in the European Union. And we decided at a really early stage that the emission trading system is one instrument in our economy, but also in the climate policy. So, and the whole thing, if we stop now with this strong instrument, is it a trust-building process? No, it's not. And what are the alternatives? Taxation. Do we want 27 different taxation systems in the common market? Is this a really strong signal for the outside world? It's not. And this is the reason why the Parliament is now working on the first step, is a backloading proposal. I must say we are buying only time for the next things. We expect from the Commission to fix the carbon market. In 2008, during the negotiation, the whole climate package, it was a mistake to put so many CDMs into the market and other loopholes. It was a mistake. It was also clear at this stage. And now we are paying the price for this mistake. And so this is the reason why I'm working as chairman and also as rapporteur very hard on this backloading proposal. And I guess in February, 19th of February, we have in the Environment Committee in compromise and with the support of the major groups in the end of the day, and also then at the beginning of March with the Council. But it's a long way and it's a hard way of negotiation. A compromise line could be, I tabled it with my report, that the backloading happens in the third period only once. And for those companies and sectors in the European Union which are really under high pressure, and we have our carbon leakage list, perhaps we have to check it again in both directions. In both directions. And this could be a compromise line for the next weeks, for the next months. I'm really optimistic that we can adopt with the Council in March the backloading proposal. Why is it necessary? I mention it because Europe was a front runner in the whole climate negotiation at the international level. And if we want that others join us, the signals from the US are very positive, and other big players, then we have to build up trust. And this we have to organize domestically here with concrete legislation, and to send also concrete signals to different sectors, perhaps for the energy sector. We adopted during the climate package that we want 20% renewable energies in our grids, heating, cooling, but also electricity. And if there's no benefit, then nothing will happen. The opposite will happen, that companies invested in coal and other things. And in the end of the day, the whole society is paying the price for these things. And so we have to fix it and to send really a strong signal to the international level. Doha. Doha was fine. It was not a failure, but it was also not a major success. It is going now in the right direction. We have plannings. We are now on the track, and it's fine. The European Union, I must say, has to fix the position at an earlier stage, not during the conference. And so this was the reason why in the Environment Committee the coordinators decided that we want to follow the whole procedure now for the COP, for the next COP in Poland, but also for the final COP perhaps in Paris. Perhaps we install a working group for the COP meetings to have a public debate during the whole year, which things we have to do, and also for the colleagues in the AFET committee and also for the European External Service. We need a broader debate because there's a really wide spectrum from the environment perspective, industry, but also for foreign affairs policy. In the end of the day, it's also foreign affairs policy. And we want to start this process now. So these are the things I want to mention in my introduction. And we will expect really hot days in Brussels and exciting days until March.
Great. Thank you very much.